This is Hope Incorporated Australia. We engage with citizens and communities to help achieve better, responsible environmental protection and stewardship, locally, nationally and globally. We work from and adjacent to the traditional lands of the Gayabal, Jadawa and Yugara peoples of southeast Queensland, and we acknowledge our deep respect for the inspiring, protective nature stewardship carried out by First Nations communities around the world for thousands of years.
So microforests can get us to a different future development pathway because they offer a really simple formula that is guaranteed to be successful if it's followed correctly. So if you have an area that needs regenerating, you can apply the microforest principles, and within 3 years, there'll be no bare ground, very few weeds, lots of habitat and a beautiful environment. If people and developers see how straightforward and easy it is to create microforests, then we can plant them anywhere we need environmental restoration.
A microforest, also known as a mini forest, tiny forest, pocket forest or Miyawaki forest, named after its originator, Japanese botanist Professor Akira Miyawaki, is a closely planted area of native vegetation which offers great opportunities for urban nature regeneration. Microforest plantings comprise all layers of the ecosystem: trees, shrubs, climbers, grasses and herbaceous plants. The forests can be situated in small plot sizes, can mature up to 10 times faster than traditional planting methods, require little to no maintenance after an initial couple of years, and are claimed to achieve well over 10 times more biodiversity support than do more traditional reafforestation methods. Hello and welcome. Andrew Nicholson here, host of Imagining 2040 Pathways to Flourishing Futures, a podcast from Hope Incorporated Australia. This series showcases the use of public future vision imagination to explore credible pathways leading toward climate safer, more socially supportive, better nature protected and economically fairer futures, futures which would leave no one behind. On current business-as-usual development trends, these are highly unlikely to be the sorts of future we're headed for. In today's episode, we're going to focus on the exciting prospects for extending future microforest plantings as one important element in repairing and restoring some of the massive damage done to native plant and animal species in this part of urban Australia and in and around other urban settlements across the continent. And joining me in this imaginative exploration of microforests and their wonderful future regenerative potential for our region is my inspiring guest today, Elizabeth Addie, President of the Friends of the Escarpment Parks organisation, also known from its abbreviation FEP. FEP is based in the city of Toowoomba, southeast Queensland, Australia. Elizabeth has a professional background in applied psychology, guidance and counselling, and holds a long-term interest in nature and natural environments, which has developed into a passion for native plant and bushland protection. FEP itself is a non-profit community group involved in the management, maintenance and public use of Toowoomba region's native vegetation in parks situated along the escarpments of the Dividing Range Mountains in this part of Australia. The Friends of the Escarpment Parks organisation has a future vision that eventually all of Toowoomba's bushland parks will be regenerated with local native plant species and be free of weeds. Within the last few years, and in alignment with that vision, Elizabeth and her FEP colleagues championed the establishment of the first microforest in Toowoomba, also a first for the wider southeast Queensland region. So welcome, Elizabeth. Great to have you on the podcast.
Hello, Andy. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here.
Well, let's start the conversation today by inviting you to build on that previous, albeit very short biography and give us a fuller self-introduction to you and your work. And please give us a bit of detail on how you develop the interests and energy for the work you're doing right now with FEP in 2025.
My background is that I'm a first-generation migrant. I grew up in inner-city Melbourne, and my first experience of a natural ecosystem only took place when I was 15 years old. Prior to that, I'd only seen suburban Elwood and suburban Melbourne, really. So when I was 15 years old, our school took us to Wilson's Promontory National Park, and I was really overwhelmed. This short immersion in a wilderness area had a powerful effect. It was beautiful and it was vast. And I wondered, why was this kept from me for so long? Then I became a bushwalker, and my favourite hikes were multi-day hikes where you could be fully immersed in a beautiful natural environment. I also started gardening, which I've been doing for my entire life. And then when I went to uni, I did a Bachelor of Arts degree and I majored in botany. So when I came across the microforest concept, I was very excited, and it made great sense to me to identify what type of ecosystems were originally in a location and then to restore the site or the location to the area of natural beauty by replanting the entire ecosystem. I became an active member of Friends of Escarpment Parks as a consequence of the Microforest project. Other members embraced this project, and we had really great support from members and also from the local community.
Hi, Liz. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. And listeners can follow up on the work of Friends of Escarpment Parks in more detail by following the web link in the episode show notes we'll put in there. But thank you so much for giving us that overview, that really early passion, connection, that awakening, in a sense, to nature based on those early trips, and then bushwalking, and now Friends of Escarpment Parks and the microforests, which we're going to talk about much more in a moment. So now, starting to look ahead, you've already started to do this, but can you give us some more early thoughts on how your work on establishing Toowoomba and South East Queensland region's first microforest could contribute to getting us onto a different development pathway, and that is a pathway to achieving better levels of nature protection and regeneration in this region in the years ahead, and also in the knowledge that achieving that sort of properly protected, respected place for nature here and elsewhere will be a crucial contribution to helping us move toward climate-safer futures which can better protect human health and well-being as well as that of other species. What do you have to say about that?
I think we are very susceptible to taking nature for granted because nature is really so bountiful. But unfortunately, we've cleared vast tracts of land for farming and grazing and also for timber production. I think we've just assumed that there is so much there for us, but now we're beginning to understand that natural systems are a limited resource and that we need to care for them and maintain them if we're going to survive and if they are going to survive. This, as research is showing us, is essential to human survival and well-being. Microforests are a solution that can be applied in any location. So they're very versatile, and they have been applied in very many places around the world. So microforests can get us to a different future development pathway because they offer a really simple formula that is guaranteed to be successful if it's followed correctly. So if you have an area that needs regenerating, you can apply the microforest principles, and within 3 years, there'll be no bare ground, very few weeds, lots of habitat, and a beautiful environment. If people and developers see how straightforward and easy it is to create microforests, then we can plant them anywhere we need environmental restoration. I'd like to just spend a few moments talking about how one creates a microforest, because we're referring to them throughout this episode. And in the show notes, there'll be a more detailed description of the process, and I'll provide some links to other microforests in Australia and around the world. But basically, what you're looking for in creating a microforest is you're just selecting a site, you're identifying the local ecosystem that you're planning to reproduce. Once you've identified the ecosystem, you get a plant list, and you then can source the plants. Usually you can find a community nursery that will grow the plants for you, already has them. In our case, it was Crow's Nest Community Nursery, provided most of our plants. And then the unusual step next is you have to cultivate the soil to a depth of 10 centimetres and incorporate organic matter. And then you plant the entire ecosystem in one hit. and it involves herbaceous plants right up to trees, and you plant at three plants per metre squared. So that's the two unique features of microforest planting: soil cultivation, incorporation of organic matter, and dense planting. Then you maintain it and as long as it needs it. In our case, it was only 18 months. And then we really had a fully established forest after 18 months. That was it.
Thanks for that, Liz. Fascinating snapshot of your journey, past, present and possible future. Great deal of detail there, lovely detail about this actual microforest project that you and your colleagues got up, first in the southeast corner, first in Toowoomba. Gives us a clear sense, all of that, of your personal and professional path, because it's not just the practical advice you were mentioning there, but also the values that you're bringing to this, your concern, for how humans are relating to the natural world. So upstream and downstream advice and viewpoints being given there. So let's stay with this really widespread, interconnected approach that you've been talking about. Let's channel, using imaginative energy, that into a further perspective as we launch into our first big exercise, which is time travel to 2040. So let's dive, or possibly fly, into the heart of the episode, where we use imagination to step beyond business as usual and visualize those credible pathways that could lead us towards those flourishing futures, rather than continuing to just passively accept many of today's failing development trajectories. And if you haven't listened to the series introduction yet, check it out to hear about those two contrasting views, those failing and flourishing views of the future, and the value of activating your future vision imagination to help better understand them and work with them. So Liz, and our listeners out there, imagine that you have a device that can take you forward into the longer term future, which we're setting as the year 2040, 15 years or so from now. And upon immediate arrival in this imagined future time, you already sense it isn't a business as usual future. It's a flourishing one. And you can sense, see, hear, and even taste that it is a climate safer, cooler future world, with thriving nature and natural systems, with more trees and wildlife, a lot of it possibly regenerated by the mass plantings of microforests. Human community health and well-being have been improved, and there is a fairer economy which helps support, rather than damage, those beneficial outcomes. No one is being left behind in this future, neither humans nor more than human species. And as you move about the 2040 world, you're thinking about the possible bigger picture changes that might have occurred between now and then, outside of this immediate region, across Australia and globally. For instance, how have the transformative changes in doing development differently help create this imagined, proper and respected place for nature in a wildlife richer and greener world? How have such changes also helped improve human life for the many, not just the privileged few? So now imagine you've returned to 2025 and you've come back. Can you now give us a summary from your 2040 time travel report? What did you see, hear and feel in that flourishing 2040 future? What stood out and really stayed with you?
Thank you, Andrew. That's a really hopeful and optimistic direction for us. And I'd like the idea that we keep it in our mind that we can create this future by what we do in the present. So what I saw in our region, Toowoomba and southeast Queensland, was a community that had taken simple, practical steps to make life more comfortable and a more joyful experience. We had the knowledge and the technology to build sustainable, energy-efficient housing. So we were living in houses that connected with their landscape and used minimal heating and cooling. I noticed that people seemed more relaxed in these homes. People were able to safely ride bikes and walk to their destinations because bike paths were removed from road traffic, and we had attractive tree-lined walkways. I could see people walking and riding as a normal practice to get places. Our council had worked hard to restore our bushland parks by removing the major invasive weeds which overran them. Council had also committed to a multifaceted urban and regional greening policy and supported residents to undertake habitat planting and maintain canopy trees. And now we are walking and riding. We had more time to think. And we realized that learning and knowledge are essential to human well-being, and that we needed to make important choices for our own lives and our community. We felt a deep sadness for Australia's history of conflict and disempowerment of First Nations people. We reinstituted the Truth and Justice Commission because we knew it was essential to document the oral histories of the people who had survived these injustices before they passed away. We marked significant sites and we integrated First Nations artwork and the names of places to celebrate the contributions that First Nations people had made to our country. And looking around, I asked a few people how these changes for our community life had come about. And they told me that by partnering problems together, they had found simple and great solutions. These were the partnerships that they told me about. We need housing and we need to conserve energy. So energy efficient housing became the norm. We need to exercise more and we need to reduce emissions. So designated safe bicycle paths and walkways were created. We need greenery to keep us cool and comfortable, and animals and birds and wildlife need habitat. So we did more planting and reduced clearing and implemented urban greening practices for our communities. By making careful planting choices for designated bike and walking trails in our suburban areas, we created wildlife corridors between our bushland parks. And we need to honour the lives of the people who had come before us and who had suffered greatly when Australia was colonised. And we need to ensure that their knowledge and wisdom is preserved and kept alive. So we reinstated Queensland's Truth and Justice Commission, and we bravely faced the truth of our shared histories.
Wow, Liz. I mean, look, what can I say? Thanks for that really great, really well fleshed out, so, thoroughly thought through imaginary vision of a better 2040 future. I mean, you've just demonstrated in spades the use of future vision imagination, not just for entertainment. There's nothing wrong with that, to create either a utopian or a dystopian fantasy, but rather to help craft credible visions of possible flourishing futures, visions grounded in professional expertise, lived experience, and a public desire, which is well demonstrated by survey after survey out there. The public want to achieve better development pathways to safeguard the well-being of the generations to follow. But you put that in such a comprehensive way. Fantastic work. Thank you so much for that. And just to make the point, we want to promote the brilliant use of imagination that you've just demonstrated in this way to help explore intriguing questions underpinning this podcast series, one or two at least anyway. What if the magical what if questions? What if many more people could imagine and visualize flourishing community futures in the way that you've just done? And could increase what if we could increase the use of such public imagination to help achieve those futures more likely? For instance, just in terms of the specific topic for today, what might be the outcomes, just possibly, if enough people sought answers to a question like, what if a goal of planting many more microforests to help regenerate nature across our region was incorporated as a regular organising principle into future citizen-led planning decisions? Let's mull on that for a while. Okay, now for a quick debrief, Liz, because, whilst time travel can be very exciting, as you've just demonstrated, it can be even euphoric. It can also be a bit tiring. I've heard this from other guests. They come back a bit fatigued or disoriented or spun out. So let's do a quick check-in to confirm we're all safely and happily back in 2025. So, Liz, what month and year is this?
This is December now, December 2025. Yes.
Brilliant. We're all back.
I'm back.
And we've adjusted the dials of the device. We're safely back in 2025, and let's stay here, back from the future, as we and our listeners explore another way to imagine plausible, flourishing futures by noticing what's already here and emerging right now. I mean by this, noticing existing initiatives which we can think of as pointers toward or signals of better ways of doing development down the track. And if amplified, multiplied and extended, these signals of the future, of a better future, could perhaps boost our chances to achieve genuinely flourishing development pathways. Such promising opportunities which signal the direction toward better futures can be found in a host of places, in reports of innovative new technologies, case studies of best practice, trends in new sustainability endeavours, and in genuinely fresh, genuinely bold new ideas on how to do future development. Such signals give us a glimpse of the kind of better world many of us would like to see in 10, 15 or 20 years and beyond. And we're not talking about fantasies here from utopia. These are real initiatives going on the ground right now. So Liz, what do you think about such future signals in your own work and with FEP colleagues? FEP is the abbreviation. FEP colleagues, what are some of the most promising signals of the future, initiatives, ideas, proofs of concept that have grabbed your attention recently? And how might they be more greatly supported and scaled to help us move more quickly down a possible pathway to achieve a respected and well-protected, citizen-stewarded place for nature in the Toowoomba region by 2040 and in the years following?
The signals that I've thought about in response to your question all involve a sense of innovation or a sense of something a bit different from what I've been aware of in the past. So the first one is that the success of our first microforest in southeast Queensland. This was a really smooth and simple process, and we had great community participation and a wonderful outcome of creating new habitat and a wildlife corridor. So each planting day had 50 to 60 participants, just from local community and local community groups. And so this shows that there is great support for microforests, for the microforest concept in our community. And the microforests have demonstrated by thousands of worldwide applications to be successful in restoring ecosystem. So this signal tells us that we have a method that works, that is simple to implement, that has community support and can be applied wherever we want to restore habitat or provide wildlife corridors or just create a beautiful natural environment. So another signal I've seen very recently is there's a local community initiative called Greening Toowoomba, and they've just engaged with the council in planting street trees in a Toowoomba suburb. The originality of this idea is that the trees are not being planted by the council employees, but they're actually being planted by residents in the suburb. And the council has fully supported the local community in getting this project off the ground. They've had one successful street tree planting so far. So another signal is that I've noticed that the preservation of ecosystems and habitat restoration has become a mainstream idea. It's no longer designated as a greenies concept, but it regularly features in the media. For example, one of my favourite shows, Gardening Australia, has one or more segments about how people and organisations are restoring bushland or recreating ecosystems in every episode. So this signal tells us that the community is ready. The signal can be supported and scaled by having local species and information about them readily available in all nurseries for people to plant in their gardens. Then people can make informed choices when selecting plants. And then another signal that I've come across and I'm very impressed by is, I thought, a council best practice. So some councils have been embracing sustainability and greening programs as the whole of community process. And I found that Wollongong Council has a fully detailed urban greening strategy. It undertakes microforest plantings. It encourages residents to green their homes and grow verge gardens. It's planting more street trees, has tree protection regulations, and has a community nursery based at the Botanical Gardens, which promotes the use of local species and provides advice and educational workshops. And it's also developing a koala food forest, and it runs after-school nature immersion programs for children. So basically, when I've looked at Wollongong, what Wollongong Council is doing, any great idea to do with more greening, more habitat, more sustainable living appears to have been embraced by the council and is now mainstream in that region. This signal tells us that local governments can be proactive and they can take the lead. Local governments can learn from each other and all implement effective greening strategies.
Liz, that future vision exercise is, again, you know, this is a perfect example. You're doing so well here in this interview of identifying, supporting and reproducing certain signals of the future, which could help accelerate progress toward reaching that flourishing, properly nature-protected development pathway we want to get on there. You've just talked about that inspirational model of Wollongong Council. I know there are other councils, other initiatives going on around the country. You know, what can be learned from them? How can those progressive, pioneering endeavours be promoted and extended? And just further imagine for a moment, what if our listeners and other citizens out there in podcast land started to actively spot and help support their own signals of the future, those pointers to achieving better ways going forward? What if, in growing alliance, those same citizens demanded stronger political action to help multiply and extend those signal initiatives? So now, Liz, as we near the end of today's brilliant conversation, let's return to your inspiring vision of a microforest regenerated, tree-covered, cooler and wildlife-richer Toowoomba region by 2040, because, sadly, here in 2025, such visionary and progressive ideas are far too often dismissed as either idealistic, unrealistic, unaffordable, or some other variety of knee-jerk criticism. This theme of vested interest pushback is also explored in our introductory episode, where we unpack how those forms of self-serving arguments often distort development debates. This podcast series aims to help counter the power of self-serving, can't-do, business-as-usual mindsets by inviting the public to get involved with bold, plausible visions of better futures. One of our own visions for the podcast series itself is to grow a community of listeners who use their imaginations on a regular basis to help co-create inclusive, community-led future development roadmaps and then push assertively for their adoption. By trying to expand the use of public future vision imagination and associated citizen political advocacy, we hope we can generate our own signals for the creation of more genuinely democratic futures, which will be fully nature protected, climate safer, more socially inclusive, supportive and economically fairer for all. So in light of that ringing testimonial on the value of assertive future vision public imagination to help achieve flourishing futures, let's start to round off this very stimulating discussion and come to our last imaginative question, Liz, and exercise of the interview. And this one showcases the imaginative idea of taking unlimited, bold, genuinely bold, assertive actions to achieve flourishing futures, actions which cannot be resisted or pushed back by vested interests. So, Liz, here's the actual exercise. Imagine you wake up tomorrow and discover you've gained a wonderful power. And that power is shared with many other imaginative allies. The power is to implement bold, well-considered, collaborative reforms that greatly benefit our natural world and our closely interlocked human and more than human communities. And those visionary reforms cannot be blocked by vested interests. So just imagine that. Well, hey! So in that scenario, what are up to 3 bold actions you'd take immediately, starting immediately, to help steer us toward a greener, cooler, tree-covered, proper place for nature in the Toowoomba region of southeast Queensland by 2040?
My bold actions are really connected with our local council, because our local council is like the hub of our community. It's a very strong organisational force in our community. And when I think about the change that the actions that I would like to implement immediately, they do involve council participation. So my first action is the council, Toowoomba Regional Council, commits to undertaking a structural change to enable people to live healthier lives. We immediately employ a team of planners and ecologists to work together to create walking paths and bike paths throughout our suburbs. CBD and the region. And at the same time, these paths are wildlife corridors. And then the pathways are built and planted without delay. Secondly, we immediately enact tree protection regulations for developers, and we assist private homeowners to better understand the role that their properties can play in providing biodiversity and habitat. And we provide incentives for new local species plantings to be undertaken. To enable this, our council needs to map and list all the bushland parks in our region. Each park is now accessible to the public to experience and explore. The maps and the locations for all the parks are available on the council website, along with information about the ecosystems that the parks contained, and also a list of plant species. So this empowers local residents to explore their parks and to understand the biodiversity which we have, and then to purchase local plants for their gardens if they want to instill more habitat and support local fauna. So we make all this easy. At the moment, we have a community nursery, which is an hour's drive away from the main population centre of Toowoomba, and it's currently only open on Thursday mornings. And this nursery does provide local species which can be used for habitat planting, but it's very hard to access. But now this has been transformed into an online nursery. Residents can have a look at what's available, and there's lots of information about the local ecosystems and the plants, and then you can order online or make a phone call to get advice, and then your plants are delivered to you. And finally, we take this opportunity of a deeper immersion and appreciation of our natural environment to pay our respects to the Indigenous people who have been custodians of this land for tens of thousands of years. And we build relationships with local Indigenous land care groups, such as the Bunya People's Aboriginal Corporation, moving forward so there can be a better understanding between different members of our community.
Well, again, Liz, you've gone well above and beyond even three. There was about half a dozen bold ideas there. And I've got to say that although they say, whoever they might be, they say that achieving change, social change is hard, which it is for a whole host of reasons. But all of those bold actions that you put forward there seem all of them seem eminently reasonable. I mean, you're not asking for, revolutionary change at the barricades here. So I really hope that, those very reasonable assertions, very reasonable suggestions get into the correct ears here in terms of getting more leverage on them and getting them enacted and implemented. But anyway, overall, amazing stuff, Liz. Once again, as you've just demonstrated, it is so energizing to hear imagination pointing us toward possible actions to achieve better could do and can do futures. It's certainly more uplifting than listening to a whole list of tired old cop-out business as usual reasons why we can't do future development in genuinely progressive ways. So now, as we come to the very end of this wonderful interview, Liz, this great uplifting interview, do you have any parting words of wisdom for our audience? A summarising comment, perhaps, which covers your main messages, or perhaps a suggestion of how listeners could get involved with the work of FEP and the ideas and initiatives we've been discussing today. Whatever you want to say in closing.
I'd like to make a comment prior to my words of wisdom. And the comment is that since you invited me to be part of this podcast, Andrew, it gave me an opportunity to reflect on your questions and consolidate these ideas, which I probably wouldn't have done without your prompting. So I appreciate this opportunity to reflect and to think about things, and then to share these ideas, which I hope people might find interesting and of value. So it's good to be prompted. And one word of wisdom is to have conversations with each other and to reflect on things. But in terms of my own process, so my initiation of the FEP-led project of creating a microforest And my participation with the Friends of Escarpment Parks is an outcome of my love of the natural world and appreciation of its beauty and its diversity. So it's been a really creative time for me. So my word of wisdom is, if you're interested and able to, go and find a green project and get involved. It will lead to a better future for all of us.
What an inspiring, positive way to round off today's conversation, Liz. You've shared such thoughtful, energising ideas about some of the kinds of actions we could take and are taking to help achieve a proper, respected place for nature in this place, in the solid understanding that in doing that, we're also protecting the future of human health and well-being, which is so dependent on the natural world in Toowoomba and southeast Queensland urban regions. And we need to do that pronto, but certainly by 2040 and beyond, one would hope. And just to do one final shout out for the brilliant work of Friends of Escarpment Parks, FEP, or FEP, depending on your viewpoint. They do excellent work, restorative, regenerative work. They've been doing it for 30-odd years in the local area. I know from personal experience, I work in one of these wonderful little pocket parks on the Escarpment. So have a look at the show note, links to the work of the Friends, and consider joining them. Consider getting in there. Extra hands are always welcome. But coming back to you, Liz, thanks one more time. On behalf of Householders Options to Protect the Environment, Hope Incorporated Australia, a big thank you for your thought-provoking contributions today. You've definitely given me, and I'm sure many other listeners out there, plenty to reflect on. So thank you, Liz.
Thanks very much, Andrew.
That was a really energising interview with Liz Addie. She clearly had done a lot of preliminary thinking around the use of the imaginative exercises and framings in the episode, and she seemed to have valued being prompted to think imaginatively and proactively about better future development pathways. She certainly came up with a lot of practical ideas that could help take Toowoomba and the wider region toward being a better protected place for nature by 2040. I was also struck by the whole upsurge of interest around microforests as a means of getting local communities involved directly in urban nature restoration and urban greening activities. Now, with more plantings occurring in different areas of the country, the microforest is clearly an idea whose time has come in Australia against a much longer-term backdrop of the experience of microforest plantings around the rest of the world. And I also liked Liz's signal of the future comments on what a visionary Australian local government, such as Wollongong City Council in New South Wales, has been doing in providing great leadership on urban nature restoration to its local community there. That council's 20-year visionary program to increase local tree cover and implement other proactive urban greening strategies includes planting what they call tiny, as opposed to microforests. Such exemplary local government leadership for nature protection has the potential to improve human and other species' health and well-being in urban areas, and we need, surely, many more such examples of progressive local governments partnering with their local communities to bring us closer toward achieving a vision for proper citizen and community stewarded places for nature in the Australia of 2040 and beyond. Anyway, there are some of the points I shall take away from my great interview with Liz. But what about you, our audience, our growing community of visionary thinkers? What will you take from today's imaginative conversation? Each of our episodes invites you to join this experiment in future visioning, to perhaps help us answer the imaginative question, what if a podcast like this could help spark the shift we need towards more just, sustainable development pathways? What if more citizens harnessed their imaginations to map out preferable, credible futures and advocated politically to make them real? Only time will tell if we can answer such questions, but meanwhile we hope this episode inspires your own imaginative conversations in homes, workplaces, communities and beyond. You might ask yourself, what could a flourishing 2040 look like for you and those around you? Or how might our imaginative podcast exercises, time travel, signals of the future and bold actions help you reflect and communicate your hopes? And if you're enjoying the series, please share it. For instance, word of mouth helps grow our audience and build a community committed to flourishing futures. And we'd love to hear from you. What resonated or challenged you? You can send your thoughts via email, social media, or voice message using the details in the show notes and on the Hope Incorporated Australia website. Suggestions for future guests, topics, or format improvements are always welcome. This podcast is a collaborative journey, and your input helps shape what comes next. So until next time, keep your imaginations alive, keep wearing your Flourishing Futures hats, and keep sharing ideas about how, together, we can reimagine development toward a thriving 2040 and beyond. My name is Andrew Nicholson, host of Imagining 2040, and thanks so much for listening. Hope Incorporated Australia, providing podcasts, research and community educational outreach to help achieve our vision of a society which is sustainable and just, ecologically, socially and economically. For more details on our work, please visit our website at www.hopeaustralia.org.au.